I was standing behind this kid at Walgreens last week. He was about 10 or 11. And it was a cold day, and he had evidently walked over to Walgreens from some apartment. There was nobody with him and nobody waiting for him. In his left hand, he had an advertisement, a circular. He was waving it at the clerk. And he also had a big, large bottle of pink lemonade. In his right hand, he had two value-sized bundles of Charms Blow Pops. They just sort of hung from his hand like two trout on a fishing line. It became clear why he was there. He had this advertisement that said, buy one value-size bunch of Blow Pops, get a second one for free. He was there to cash in on this good fortune. He had a sugar rush of epic proportions coming his way. The guy said, yep, you're right, that's right. Buy one, get one free. What's your Walgreens card? Do you have it with you? This is a 10-year-old kid. This is the first he's ever heard of a Walgreens card. He goes, I don't have a Walgreens card. And the man said, the coupon's only good for people with a Walgreens membership card. He said, it's going to be $20. If you don't have the Walgreens card, it'll be a little under 10 if you have one. And the kid says, well, no, I'm buying the one for me. I'm going to give the other to my sister for Christmas. He starts shelling out money from his pocket. He's got a $5 bill. He's got 4 ones. He's got a pocket full of change. He dumps it all on there. It's about $10.20. He turns dejectedly back towards the aisle. And then the clerk says, wait a minute. Do you know your telephone number? The kid goes, yeah, I know my telephone number. He said, well, punch it into this little machine, and if your parents have one, it'll come up and you can get the big deal of the day. And he's typing it in, nothing. Then he takes his phone. This kid has a phone, and he starts typing in every number in his phone book. Evidently, nobody in his network was a Walgreens Club member. Now he's crestfallen. Now it's bad news. But then the clerk looks past me. Evidently, I didn't look like a guy who would have a Walgreens card either. He looks right past me and says to the man behind me, hey, amigo, do you have a Walgreens card? The guy goes, yeah, I got one. Do you mind if this kid uses it to get the deal of the day? No. And he comes up and he types in, it took him 2 or 3 numbers, but finally the cash register blinks, bloom, 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 and the sum $9.98 comes up. The kid's so excited, he's hopping on one foot and then the other. He can't believe it. He grabs everything. He thanks the man. He thanks the clerk. He thanks God, and he fairly well floats out of Walgreens with visions of sugar plums dancing in his head. Hope occurs when a promise is made. When you hear that something good's going to happen, hope springs eternal. And then there's that long period of time between when the promise is made and when the promise is kept. And in the middle of all that, only love can see you through. Love is all that can see you through that long time waiting. Joy arrives when the promise is kept. That kid showed up at Walgreens with hope because he'd read in the paper, I can get 2 for 1. And then it was love that saw him through the difficulties that emerged. Love for his sister, love for his blow pops, and the clerk's compassion and care for this kid, and the guy behind me who says, yeah, I don't care, whatever I can do to help. And joy came in when he walked out with that candy. It had all come true. The promise had been kept. Somebody says to somebody else, will you marry me? And hope ignites. And you stand in a church one day and you look at each other and you say, for better or worse, for richer or poor, for sicker or not so sick, and you make all those pledges. Love you till death do us part. And then you move into that long period of time after the wedding where you're learning to actually love one another. You remember those days? There's all that immaturity and the spats, and I didn't know it was going to be this way, and frustration, and all that kind of stuff that goes on as you try to grow up together. It's only love that gets you through those days. Physical love and emotional love and spiritual love. Love for one another. And you love and you love and you get through. And then one day you're sitting on a park bench with your spouse and you're eating a peanut butter sandwich that you shared with one another, and you look at each other and you think, I believe the day has come when we love each other as much as we said we were going to love each other. Joy rings in the heart. You take the pregnancy test and it says, hey, you're pregnant. And hope is born in two souls. But then there's a period of time, I don't know if you all remember this, between when the promise is made and the promise is kept. You got 9 months usually, and there's all this frustration and pain and hormonal rushes, as I remember, and you've got morning sickness, and you got, that's all, the wife gets to carry all that. But the husband sitting there going, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and it's all kind of confusing, and some days are good and some days are overwhelming, and then you're nervous, and you buy the How to Do It book, and you talk to people, are we ready? Are we ready? I don't know, and you're moving through time, and you buy enough nursery supplies to fill a corn silo, and it's only love that gets you through those days. Only love gets you through those days. And when you're rushing to the hospital and the pain is building and is it all going to work out? Whoa, it's only love. You're holding hands, you're hanging on, and then the baby comes and you hold it up. And joy, waves of joy that you can't even express with tears and hugs and kisses and balloons and flowers and cigars. That's the way it works in life. A promise is made and you have hope. And then you're waiting for the promise to be kept. And only love gets us through. And then one day, the promise is kept. And joy inexpressible comes up. Mary's just sitting there minding her own business when the angel shows up. And the angel says, you've been favored, young lady. You're going to get to give birth to the Christ child. And Mary has questions, right? She has really good questions. Like, I don't know what you're thinking about, but that's not going to happen. And they kind of work through the question and answer period. And she learns, yes, if you will say yes, you will be the mother of the Christ child. And she says, let it be to me. And somewhere across town, I guess, Joseph is asleep. And because he's asleep, his consciousness is not putting up all the rebuttals and the obstruction and the disbelief and the debunking when God tries to talk to him. You see, our consciousness, when God tries to talk to us, we have all this rational activity, all this consciousness that says, that can't be God, that's going to be something else. What did I eat for dinner? I don't know, maybe my emotions, maybe something's happening. But when you're asleep, all that drops away, and God has a clear thoroughfare, a highway to your brain, and can come in there. And that's what he did for Joseph. He spoke right to Joseph in a dream and said, Joseph, I need you to be the earthly father of my son. I want you to name him. I want you to protect him. I want you to provide for him. I want you to give support to the mother. I want you to be there through thick and thin. Will you do it, Joseph? And Joseph says he will. And hope is born. And then it gets rough. They separate. You remember that part of the story? Mary goes to see Elizabeth, and Joseph hangs out in Nazareth. Maybe he had to work. I don't know what was going on. But you don't know for a minute. You don't know for a minute. How's it all going to work out? And then Mary teaches us something that we have to know in order to experience joy in this world. She goes to see Elizabeth. And when she goes to see Elizabeth, Elizabeth says, when you walked in, the baby in my womb leaped for joy to be in the presence of his Lord. And when Mary hears that, she goes out and sings a song. She writes a song right there on the spot, and she sings it. My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit rejoices. My spirit has joy, joy, joy. But look carefully, the baby's not yet been born. Somehow Mary figured out how do you bring joy from the future when a promise is kept into today when you're waiting on the promise. All the saints can do this, by the way. Jeremiah goes out and he buys a plot of land when Jerusalem is falling to the Babylonian armies. I bet he got it cheap, don't you imagine? I bet he got it cheap. Guy goes, I can't hang on to this anyway. I'll sell it to you for $5. Just take it. He buys it, and everybody says, why in the world, Jeremiah, would you buy a piece of land in a city that is in the midst of being destroyed? And Jeremiah says, because my God has promised me that one day my descendants will come back here, and when they do, I'm going to have a title to some land waiting on them. He reaches into the future far before anything happens, and he brings the joy into the midst of difficulty, saying, my God will keep promises. Paul and Silas, they've been put in jail by the most powerful empire on the planet. They have no earthly way of escaping, and they're sitting in there praying, and they start singing. I've got that joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I'm almost positive that's what they were singing. Maybe it was joy to the world. I don't know. They had some kind of joy, 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 happy dance thing going on while they're in prison, you know. They're sitting there. They got shackles on them, a bar. Long before the earthquake starts rumbling the ground, and long before the shackles break and the bars pop open, and they go dancing out there singing a song of joy. They bring joy from the future into the moment. So I don't know how it's all going to work out, but God's going to keep the promises God has made. And I got joy already. You ever heard people say worry is borrowing trouble from tomorrow and bring it in today? Mary shows us how to borrow joy from tomorrow and bring it right into today. And I need Mary to teach me how she did that. Because comparatively speaking, right, a lot more time in our life is spent on receiving a promise and waiting for a promise. And the time that the promise is kept is a blink of the eye. And if I can only have joy when the promise is kept, I'm going to live my whole life waiting on joy, which is not the same as being joyful. A couple of weeks ago, I was standing in my front yard in Harper's Ferry by a roofer. And he had just come down off the roof. And he said, you got some soft spots up there. You're going to need a new roof. Now, a guy had gone up there a couple of days before to fix my chimney. And he had come down and he said, you got some soft spots on this roof. You're going to need a new roof. So I asked the guy, how much money are we talking? And he told me. And I just passed out right there. And then I got back up on my feet, and he steadied me a bit. He said, I'll bring you an exact estimate on Monday. I said, I'm not going to be here Monday. I'm only here a day or two a week. I live in Hyattsville. And he said, oh, what do you do in Hyattsville? There's always a big breath between me answering that question. I said, I am a pastor of a Baptist church. And he said, then you know, and he grinned. I said, I know what? He said, Jesus is coming back any day now. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, it can't get any worse than this, can it? He said, look at the politics and the disease and how people hate and killing and suffering. This is it, man. This is it. Now, I neither confirmed nor denied his observation because all of that's way above my pay grade. I don't know what God's going to do and when God's going to do it. So I listened, but I thought to myself, buddy, people have been thinking that for 2,000 years. Since the day Jesus said it, I'll be back, people have thought it's got to be now. Things are so rough, it can't get any worse. Misery has reached epic proportions. It's got to be now. And it wasn't now. And if we sit around waiting to have full joy only until the day that Jesus returns, if we're just gritting our teeth out here in the misery of things and hoping something changes and waiting for God to do something, we're going to live our whole life without joy. But if we can bring some of that joy from the future in, I turned to the guy and I said, "You really believe Jesus is coming back in the next few days?" He goes, "I really do. Maybe before the end of the year." So I said, "Well, then I got no need to write you a check for this roof. You'll never cash it anyway." And he's changed his tune a little bit then. He recalibrated. We got to know how to do that, and Matthew tells us how we can bring the joy of the future right in here, because he accents a theme that we take for granted maybe in this world, but before this they did not. He tells Joseph, when you have this baby, and then he remembers something that Isaiah said 800 years before Jesus was born, and he quotes it. He says, Isaiah got a promise from God that one day there would be a child born to a virgin, and that child would be named Emmanuel, which means God with us. Matthew's saying we can rejoice right now because God is already with us. You say, didn't everybody always know that? No, read your Old Testament. They're always wondering, where is God? Why did God leave? Where did he go? Why is he hiding? How did he get him back? Can we offer some sacrifices? Can we go to war? Can we pledge something? Can we sacrifice somebody? Can we do something to get God back and on our side? It's all this up and down. Where is God? Will God help me? How do I make it through? And here in the story of Christmas, we're told this child is proof positive that right now God is with us. And because of that truth, we can rejoice and have joy right now, right where you are, whatever's going on. God is with you. Is that good news to you? Say amen. Yeah, that makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? The very inspirational Christian writer Richard Rohr tells a little story about a little slice of life that spoke to him. He was in a big city to give a speech, and he got lost in the newspaper that he was reading and eating breakfast and the second or third cup of coffee. And then he looked at his watch and thought, I'm going to be late. And where he was speaking was 3 or 4 blocks away. And so he bolted out of the hotel and he ran down, and there was a red light. There's always a red light at the wrong time, right? And so he's standing there and he's so upset and he's so irritated and he's so fidgety, and he says, how long is this light going to be red? And he's waiting and waiting. And then he says that in his mind, in his spirit, God said, Richard, how different is your life really going to be when you get to the other side of this street? What is really going to be all that different when you cross that street? Won't you still be in a hurry, Richard? Yeah. Won't you still be nervous about your speech? Yeah. And when that speech is over, Richard, aren't you going to start thinking of what's next? And then aren't you going to think about the speech and did I do well? And I don't know if I did well. And it's going to be all that. It's just going to go on and on and on, Richard. Richard, am I with you on this side of the street? Yes, Lord, you are. And will I be with you on the other side of the street? Yes, Lord, you will. Then relax, Richard. Relax, Richard. I'm with you always. Rejoice. We got to learn to do that. If not, we live out all the days of our lives waiting for something to happen. And that's no way to live. We can bring the joy of every promise God ever made right into today, for God is with us. God is with us when the doctor comes and says you have cancer. And God is with us through all the difficulty of the chemo and the radiation and all the other stuff that goes on. God is right there. And God is with us when the doctor comes back out and says, you're in remission. Praise be to God. You're in a mission. You're going to be okay. God's with us through the whole time, through the hope, through the love that gets us through, and through the promise kept. God is with us. When we get that call and says there's been an accident on the highway and your loved one was in the accident, God's with us as we rush to the hospital and hold that loved one's hand and pray. And God's with us with the nurses and the medical facilities. And then God is with us as the healing takes place and we get to go home with that loved one. The promise is kept. God is with us. And God is with us when we come to in that ambulance and we realize I've finally done it this time. I've overdosed or I've drank too much or my head's spinning and my heart's gone and we're on the way to the hospital. God is with us, and God is with us through the treatment they put us through and through the rehab we have to go to. And God is with us when our sobriety returns and we live a life free of that shackle. God is with us. And God is with us when our sister calls and says, you better come. She's not going to linger much longer. And we rush to the hospital and stand beside our mother and love her and love our sister. And when her soul goes on to be with God, we crumble in each other's arms. For God is with us. God is with us. And on that day, when the doctor tells us there's not anything more I can do, and our own children come to circle the bed, and somebody holds our hand, and we wait, and the angels come, and we go home. And God has kept his very best promise to us all. God is with us. God is always with us. In the days of hope, in the days of waiting and love, and the day when all the promises are kept. God is with us. Thanks be to God for the message of Christmas. Go forth in joy, for the Lord is with you. Amen.